First story, a friend I knew from college days hit the jackpot when he scored a visa lottery that allowed him to move to the United States. This success story ignited a spark in me to also try my luck for a lottery visa, hoping to pave the way for my wife and me to make the move as well. Both of us were in our mid-20s, and we had always harbored fantasies about finding better opportunities in the U.S. While I clung to the hope that luck might favor us, my wife remained quite skeptical. She kept reminding me of the slim chances of actually getting into the program. Admittedly, she wasn't wrong. But despite her reservations, I was determined not to give up. The thought of a brighter future for us in a different country fueled my persistence. Despite holding college degrees, we struggled to secure decent jobs back home. So, with whatever money I could scrape together, I took a leap of faith and launched a small shop. My wife and I became shop owners, barely making enough to cover the shop's rent. But we held on, driven by the dream of a better life across the ocean. Then, out of the blue, a letter arrived in the mail that was about to flip our lives upside down: the lottery visa. The moment we learned that we were among the lucky winners, our hearts swelled with excitement and hope. I'll admit, I had this rosy image of the United States in my head. I thought all our struggles were finally over, and my wife and I were ready to ride off into the sunset and live the classic American dream. However, there was one snag: we needed a sponsor in the U.S. Our choices boiled down to my old classmate, now living in Georgia, and a childhood neighbor from way back, though we weren't particularly close. My classmate didn't fit the bill due to his recent move. So the neighbor stepped in, generously offering to let us share his two-bedroom apartment in New York, where he lived with his family. Once we set foot in the United States, reality hit us like a storm. The dream we had painted of America felt distant and blurry. The neighbor who was supposed to help us unexpectedly threw us out after just 2 months, hardly enough time to get our act together. My wife and I found ourselves hustling to find jobs and a place to stay, the harsh truth sinking in that the neighbor's place wasn't even enough for his own family, let alone us. Despite the abrupt turn of events, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude towards the U.S. Opportunities seemed abundant, even though the pay wasn't great for our desired lifestyle. So we found ourselves caught in the relentless rat race, working tirelessly to make ends meet. To add to the challenge, my wife got pregnant around that time. She switched to part-time work while I held down 2 jobs, often putting in grueling 20-hour days. In an effort to ease our transportation woes, I eventually purchased a motorcycle. Life became a whirlwind of work, with my wife managing household chores and cooking while I brought in the income. Despite the rocky start, we managed to find our footing. Within 13 months, we secured our own apartment, and I had a motorcycle while my wife had a car. I found work as a machine operator at a local mill shop, and life began to feel somewhat stable. However, deep down, I knew there was still room for improvement. I recognized the signs of impending burnout and understood that to climb the ladder and improve our social standing, we needed higher education. My wife and I had already earned bachelor's degrees back in our home country. However, here in the United States, those degrees didn't carry much weight unless we obtained a different kind of degree called a Master of Business Administration, which required 2 years of study. So we sat down together and crafted a plan to navigate this challenge. The plan was simple yet strategic. My wife would pursue her Master of Business Administration while I worked to support us. Once she completed her studies and secured a job, we would switch roles, and I would then pursue my Master of Business Administration. At first glance, it seemed like a solid plan, one that held the promise of a brighter future for both of us. However, as life often goes, things didn't unfold exactly as we had hoped. While my wife embarked on her Master of Business Administration journey, I stayed connected with an old college friend living in Georgia. This friend had found success as a real estate agent, flipping houses and earning a good income. He continuously urged me to consider moving down to Georgia, highlighting its lower cost of living and abundant opportunities. Despite his persuasive arguments, I hesitated, feeling comfortable in our current situation in New York. Looking back, I realize now that this reluctance to change our circumstances was one of the significant missteps we made during this time. Despite my reservations about relocating, life in New York was treating us well. I was earning more money than ever before, and I was even able to support our families back home. Meanwhile, my wife, driven and determined, understood the value of obtaining a Master of Business Administration. She saw it as a stepping stone to a better future for us both. Thus, she diligently attended classes in the evenings, while I took on the responsibility of caring for our baby at home. Additionally, we formed a supportive arrangement with our neighbors, who also had young children, to exchange babysitting favors, allowing us to manage our responsibilities more effectively. The journey was challenging, with long hours and financial strain, but our shared dreams and unwavering commitment to each other kept us moving forward. After 3 years of hard work and dedication, my wife successfully completed her Master of Business Administration program and secured a well-paying job at a logistics company. It was a moment of triumph, and we felt hopeful about what the future held for our family. However, just when things seemed to be falling into place, a shift occurred. The initial months of my wife's new job brought joy and fulfillment, as I transitioned into the role of a stay-at-home dad to focus on completing my Master of Business Administration program. But gradually, I noticed changes in my wife's behavior. She started working longer hours, spending more time with her colleagues and new friends, and neglecting our family time together. It seemed as though she had become entranced by the American lifestyle, driven by her career success and disconnected from our shared values and roots. Despite my attempts to address the issue, she grew defensive and distant, seemingly forgetting the sacrifices I had made for our family's well-being. It was disheartening to witness her transformation into someone who prioritized personal gratification over our family's happiness and stability. When my wife began making more money than me, things changed in our everyday life. She started staying late at work, hanging out with friends and colleagues. I ended up juggling between studying and taking care of our baby. Sometimes someone else looked after our little one, probably our neighbor. On top of that, I was on the lookout for a side job to have some extra cash, so I wouldn't have to keep asking my wife for money. At home, I took on the responsibilities of managing household chores, cooking, and looking after our child, while my wife was solely focused on her job. Despite my efforts to keep things running smoothly, her late arrival home often brought a sour mood, making it hard to maintain peace in our household. I tried my best to keep her happy, even suggesting massages, but it seemed that no matter what I did, she always found something to complain about. As time passed and her career success grew, I noticed a strain on our marriage. Arguments became more frequent, with her often putting me down for not having a job or a college degree. Her words hurt, leaving emotional wounds that took time to heal. It was a stark contrast to the days when we struggled together, finding comfort in shared smiles and cherishing each moment. Driven by a desire to contribute financially and escape the verbal attacks, I began exploring other ways to make money. In secret, I took up work as a food delivery driver during my free moments when our neighbor could watch our daughter. This not only provided me with extra cash for small expenses, but also allowed me to buy perishable items for our baby without raising suspicion. Despite her newfound financial success, my wife stopped checking in to see if I needed money after a few months. This put additional pressure on me to cover expenses such as diapers and food for our daughter. I tried to remind her of our financial plan, but it often led to heated arguments. Balancing a full-time job with attending school became increasingly challenging due to scheduling conflicts, prompting me to rely more on the food delivery job. As our relationship strained further, my wife's late nights at work and social outings with friends became more frequent. I refrained from asking about her whereabouts to avoid conflict, feeling as though she had already given up on us. During arguments, she would threaten to involve the police and kick me out of the apartment, despite my contributions in other areas. Despite her threats and insults, I remained steadfast and never resorted to violence. She began undermining my role in caring for our child, insisting that she could manage without me and afford daycare. It seemed that her behavior was influenced by her American friends, leaving me bewildered and struggling to comprehend her actions. Despite the challenges and strains on our marriage, I remained committed to finding a resolution and restoring the harmony we once shared. I found myself in a complete state of confusion, utterly clueless about what was unraveling in my marriage. The turning point occurred on an ordinary evening, much like the countless days I spent hustling with food deliveries. It was around 5:30 p.m., and I decided to run some errands before my wife returned home for the day. My destination was an apartment where I was supposed to drop off a food order. With optimism, I approached the customer's door, planning to unleash my usual charm in the hopes of securing a tip. As I stood on the doorstep holding the food, I pressed the doorbell. To my surprise, the door swung open, sending a chill down my spine. There, before me, stood my wife, wrapped in a white towel as if she had just stepped out of the shower. A mix of shock and disbelief surged through me, rendering me speechless. It appeared that she was equally stunned, standing there without uttering a word. In my confusion, I was on the verge of asking her why she was at this place and whose apartment it was. However, before I could gather my thoughts, she panicked and abruptly slammed the door shut in my face. Still clutching the food, I tossed it aside, fueled by a rush of emotions. Determined to get some answers, I kicked the door open. The door swung inward and accidentally struck her in the face, causing her to tumble to the floor. As if fate had a dramatic flair, the towel she had loosely wrapped around herself unveiled that she was wearing nothing underneath. The impact left a sizable bruise on her forehead, swelling up like a golf ball in no time. In the midst of this chaotic scene, my wife yelled for the owner of the house, who turned out to be her affair partner. He hastily appeared, looking bewildered, dressed only in shorts and no shirt. My wife, now on her feet but visibly scared, sought refuge behind him, anticipating my next move. I attempted to explain that she was my wife, and we shared a baby, but he brushed off my words, persistently pushing me. The situation quickly escalated into a physical altercation. Picture this. There I was, engaged in a scuffle with this unclothed individual, while my wife, with hardly anything on, screamed at the top of her lungs. The commotion drew attention, prompting someone to call the police. Before I could fully comprehend the turn of events, I found myself in handcuffs, cooling off in the back of a police car. It was in that moment, confined behind the police car, that the gravity of my predicament hit me. My life seemed on the brink of collapse, with the looming possibility of being sent back to my home country. As the police conversed with my wife and her lover, both visibly rattled, I sat there, contemplating my fate. Eventually, one of the cops approached me, and through tears, I poured out the bewildering sequence of events I had just experienced. To my surprise, this particular officer displayed empathy. He inquired about whether I had a place to stay, any close friends, or family nearby. I mentioned my sponsor, and he advised me to head there instead of returning home. With brutal honesty, he laid out the stark reality that going back to my wife and daughter in my current state could result in assault charges and deportation. According to him, my wife seemed intent on pressing charges, and he had witnessed similar scenarios countless times. In the labyrinth of emotions, as I grappled with the profound disdain emanating from my wife and sought answers to where our once solid connection had unraveled, an unexpected ally emerged in the form of a compassionate police officer. He offered counsel that was crystal clear: seek legal guidance and sever all connections with my wife. In an act of foresight, he shared the address of a nearby shelter, recognizing the potential need for refuge. Following the removal of the handcuffs and his departure, the tactile remnants they left on my wrists became poignant reminders of the precipice I teetered upon, a precipice shaped by my emotional entanglement with a woman. This realization struck me at my core, highlighting the stark isolation I felt in this foreign land. With a heart weighed down by sorrow, I reached out to a friend residing in Georgia. His generous offer of refuge in his apartment was accompanied by a word of caution, emphasizing the potential ramifications of lingering in my current situation. The specter of my daughter losing both parents loomed ominously, underscoring the unwavering determination with which my wife seemed poised to dismantle the foundations of my life. Within me, a tempest of anger and heartbreak waged a relentless battle. Despite the well-intentioned advice from the police officer, an irresistible urge pulled me back to my home to retrieve my belongings. The very idea of cohabiting with my wife had become intolerable. The unyielding reality of my circumstances forced me to confront the confines of my choices and navigate the uncertain path that lay ahead. Upon my return home, a charged atmosphere awaited me. My wife had already brought our daughter back from the neighbors, bracing for a confrontation. Baseless accusations of abandonment were hurled at me. Unmoved by her attempts to elicit a reaction, I clung to my resolve and steadfastly refused to participate in her calculated plays. Adopting the gray rock approach, I sought to render myself inconspicuous, minimizing any reaction to her provocations. As I retreated to the bedroom to gather my belongings, the partially opened door offered glimpses of her attempts to scrutinize my actions. The gravity of my departure seemed beyond her grasp, and tears welled in my eyes as I packed, burdened by shame and emotional exhaustion. Dragging my luggage toward the exit, the realization slowly dawned on my wife that my departure was imminent. Apologies gushed forth, a desperate plea to rectify the irreparable. Yet the die was cast. Despite her impassioned pleas for forgiveness, I remained resolute in my decision to leave. Regrettably, it marked the inception of a prolonged separation from my daughter, a thought that bore heavily on my heart. Loading my possessions onto my bike, I embarked on a southward journey, eventually finding respite in a modest hotel. Unyielding in my determination not to part with my bike, I chose to pedal from New York to Georgia. This arduous physical journey served as a metaphorical pilgrimage, exchanging the oppressive atmosphere of New York for the invigorating breeze of freedom. Arriving at my friend's apartment, open arms greeted me, offering solace during this trying period. His couch became a temporary sanctuary, providing much-needed comfort and support. Despite my wife's persistent attempts at communication, messages, apologies, and pleas, I clung to the decision to sever all ties. Her recourse to my family as intermediaries in her bid to coax my return underscored the depth of her desperation. Yet I held steadfast, determined to forge ahead on a solitary path. The road ahead, though fraught with uncertainties, beckons as an avenue to reclaim my identity and craft a brighter future for myself and my daughter. The echoes of my journey resonate with the inviolable spirit of resilience, a testament to the human capacity to endure and rebuild amidst life's tumultuous tribulations. As the chapters of this tumultuous saga unfold, the narrative is woven with threads of fortitude and self-discovery. Each pedal stroke on the journey from New York to Georgia becomes a metaphor for the relentless pursuit of personal liberation. The sanctuary of my friend's apartment becomes a haven for healing and renewal. The messages and pleas from my wife serve as a persistent but fading echo of a past that no longer holds sway over my future. In the face of adversity, the decision to sever ties becomes an act of self-preservation, a necessary step toward reclaiming agency in the unfolding narrative of my life. The complexities of human relationships, entangled with betrayal and heartache, are met with the unwavering resolve to chart a course toward a brighter tomorrow. As I navigate the uncharted territories of separation, I am reminded that the journey toward self-discovery is often accompanied by discomfort and uncertainty. Yet, within the crucible of challenges, there emerges a resilient spirit, a testament to the enduring strength inherent in the human experience. The road ahead may be shrouded in shadows, but each step is a declaration of autonomy and a stride toward a future shaped by resilience and renewed purpose. In the meantime, my buddy ventured into real estate, and he pulled me along. I got my license and dove into the world of buying and selling houses just 2 months after bidding farewell to the hustle of New York. I clinched the deal on my first property, and that marked the beginning of my real estate journey. A year later, I found myself smitten with another realtor, and our connection deepened. As our relationship progressed, we reached a point where the natural next step loomed, but I made it clear that I had no plans of venturing into the realm of marriage again. She understood my history, and our compatibility paved the way for mutual understanding. Not to brag, but real estate had turned into a goldmine for me. Flipping houses had my bank account ringing, bringing in 5 times more than what a Master of Business Administration degree might have yielded. Christmas rolled around, and I decided to surprise my girlfriend with a getaway to New York. The plan included spending time with my daughter and officially initiating the divorce proceedings with my estranged wife. Upon reaching New York, I took the bold step of reaching out to my estranged wife, breaking over a year of silence. The news of hearing from me caught her off guard, and her eagerness to meet was palpable. I visited her, keeping the fact that I had a serious girlfriend under wraps. The highlight, of course, was reuniting with my daughter. Both of them still shared the same apartment, and unfortunately, my soon-to-be ex-wife assumed I was returning to reconcile. I remained unfazed by her tears as she realized that my visit was meant to end our marriage. I couldn't forget that not too long ago, she aimed to have me in cuffs and sent away after I caught her in her affair. Clarifying my purpose, I explained that my trip to New York focused on seeing my daughter and finalizing our divorce. Keeping quiet about my girlfriend was a deliberate choice, as I didn't want any complications affecting the custody arrangements for my daughter. For now, I plan to cherish my time in New York with my daughter before heading back to Georgia alongside my girlfriend. My hope is that once the divorce is legally settled, my daughter will be able to visit Georgia more frequently. Second story: last week, I was hit with some devastating news that shook me to the core. It turns out that my 24-year-old fiancé had been unfaithful to me with her much older boss, who's likely in his mid-40s. What's worse, he's married and has 3 kids. The betrayal occurred during a work trip last November when they were away from home, and to my disbelief, they hooked up not just once, but 3 times. The bombshell dropped when the boss's wife reached out to me on Facebook. She bravely spilled all the sordid details and even showed me the messages and emails they exchanged, discussing their deceitful escapades and how they managed to keep their affair hidden. It was a gut-wrenching revelation to learn about the betrayal, especially when I read how they callously joked about their infidelity, while my fiancée professed her love for me and stressed the need to keep their affair a secret. The boss's wife, whom I've had the pleasure of meeting and who always seemed kind at company events, understandably felt devastated and enraged. She's gearing up to serve her husband with divorce papers tomorrow and plans to inform their company's human resources department about the affair. As I sit here typing this on my phone, my fiancé is on the other side of the room, completely unaware that her world is on the verge of crashing down tomorrow. Despite the pain and anger coursing through me, I can't help but feel a sense of detachment from her. The hurt runs deep as I reflect on the 3 years of my life that seem to have been wasted on a relationship built on lies and betrayal. Yet, I'm grateful that I discovered the truth before walking down the aisle. Tomorrow, I've decided to take the day off from work. When my fiancée heads out to her job, I'll gather her belongings, pack them up, and leave them by the door. It's a necessary step to rid myself of her presence in my life. Additionally, I'll need to figure out if there's any way to recoup the money I've already invested in our now-canceled wedding, which was originally slated for October. I've contemplated various ways to confront her about her infidelity. Initially, I toyed with the idea of publicly exposing her by posting the incriminating messages on social media. However, after consulting with my sister, I decided against it. I also considered reaching out to her parents to inform them of her betrayal, but I'm hesitant about the impact it could have on their relationship with me. Ultimately, I've resolved to let her face the consequences of her actions on her own. I have no interest in hearing her excuses or lies anymore. All I want is for her to leave my life so that I can begin to heal and move forward. Though it's a painful chapter to close, I'm determined to focus on rebuilding my life and finding happiness once again. Update 1. Oh my goodness. I'm having a tough time wrapping my head around the whirlwind of events that unfolded. It's like a bomb exploded, causing chaos all around me. At around 8 o'clock, my phone started buzzing like crazy with calls from my now ex-fiancé. Every call was followed by a voicemail, and I immediately understood what was about to unfold. So, without hesitation, I called up my sister to share the shocking news. She's here now, providing me with much-needed support and keeping me company through this tumultuous time. Following that, I had a difficult phone conversation with my ex-fiancé's mom. It's surreal to think of her as my ex now. The conversation was challenging because her mom has done nothing to deserve the heartbreak she's going through. Her entire family has treated me exceptionally well right from the beginning. I tried my best to calmly explain the situation to her mom, conveying that I cannot find it within myself to forgive what has transpired. I'll be asking my ex to leave. Surprisingly, her mom seemed to comprehend why I feel this way, and she even suggested coming over to help my ex pack her things. Not a bad idea, I suppose. Afterwards, I reached out to a couple of my closest friends through text, filling them in on the shocking developments. My phone has been constantly buzzing with messages from them, but I've conveyed that I'll catch up with them as soon as I can. Right now, I'm feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of everything that's happened. I listened to one voicemail from my ex, and it played out just as I expected, her crying and pleading with me to call her so that we can have a serious conversation. I called her back, but she didn't answer, so I resorted to sending her texts. She rang me back in a flash, launching into a comprehensive apology routine. She questioned why I had to call her mom and involve other people in this mess. Unable to contain my anger, I asked her how she thinks I feel, having to get tested for sexually transmitted diseases because my own fiancé cheated on me. Can you even fathom how humiliating that is? At least she didn't attempt to deny what she did. I conveyed to her that she needs to come by this afternoon to pick up her belongings, marking the official end of our relationship. She mentioned that we'll have a more in-depth talk later, but I swiftly shut her down, asserting that there's not much left to discuss. I also confronted her about how she and this other man could gossip about me and his own wife, laughing about how she gained weight after having kids. It's just heartless, particularly since that poor woman didn't deserve any of this. Neither did I. I reminded her that she can't use the excuse of feeling pressured because he's her boss. Her texts make it abundantly clear that she was more than willing to go along with it all. I reckon she's got a meeting with human resources at her job today, and the entire office is abuzz with talk about their little escapade. At this point, I can't muster an ounce of sympathy for either of them. I'm already emotionally drained, and it's not even 10 a.m. yet. Once she's done with her human resources discussion, she's headed over here to pick up her belongings. I'm hopeful that it all transpires with minimal drama. My sister should be here, and I'm crossing my fingers that her mom tags along. The landlord says she'll be around too, and she's in the process of changing the locks for me. Hopefully, that'll happen either this afternoon or tomorrow. I recognize that this might seem like a rambling post, but I was attempting to recall everything I said, and my mind is racing like crazy right now. Update too well, she's finally out of the picture. When she showed up at my place, it was quite the scene. Her mom and her best friend came along, and thankfully my sister was there too. Surprisingly, there was no shouting or arguing, which I was grateful for. She asked if we could have a private chat, just her and me, but I knew there was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said in those damning text messages between her and her boyfriend. I politely declined her request, stating that I didn't see the point. As expected, the waterworks started flowing as soon as she realized that I wasn't going to change my mind. Her mom tried to assure me that they'd make her departure as swift as possible. So, while she and her friend went to grab some of her belongings, I had a moment to chat with her mom. She apologized to me, expressing her disappointment in her daughter's behavior. She even asked if the guy she had been seeing was really married, to which I confirmed, much to her dismay. As they were getting ready to leave, I brought up the topic of the engagement ring. It felt like a bitter reminder of what could have been. It didn't seem like it held much sentimental value to her anymore. Her friend seemed like she wanted to say something about it, but a quick glance or signal from her mom shut her down. It wouldn't surprise me if her friend had known about the affair all along. Despite her reluctance, her mom insisted that she hand over the ring. So, with a heavy heart, her friend reluctantly passed it to her mom, who then handed it to me, apologizing once again for her daughter's actions. I couldn't bear to look at the ring. It felt like a symbol of broken promises and shattered dreams. I just let it fall onto the coffee table, where it lay, mocking me with its gleaming presence. It's funny how something so small could carry so much weight. I imagine she'll come back tomorrow with her dad to collect the rest of her belongings. My sister, bless her heart, expressed her anger by saying she'd love to yank the girl's hair out by the roots. It's a sentiment I can understand, even if I don't condone it. But right now, I'm just too exhausted to feel anything but numbness. All I want to do is lie down and escape into the oblivion of sleep, if only for a little while. Third story, my wife, a 46-year-old woman, possesses a remarkable ability to foster connections with the women in our neighborhood. She is highly sociable, always immersing herself in social activities. Over the past 8 years, she has taken the lead in organizing countless social gatherings, establishing herself as the go-to person for gossip in our town. Through her efforts, she has cultivated friendships with over 40 women, one of whom is named Virginia. Virginia, much like my wife, is married and has 2 young children. I couldn't help but notice my wife's admiration for the seemingly more affluent lifestyle enjoyed by Virginia's family. While we manage to meet our financial obligations, Virginia's family seems to live in a slightly more luxurious manner, which my wife may have envied to some extent. One day, I received a call from Samantha, another friend of my wife's, expressing concern about my wife's recent absence. This news was disconcerting because my wife is typically an active participant in social events, attending meetings and gatherings at least twice a week. Samantha mentioned that my wife's absence had not gone unnoticed by others as well. Despite being in the midst of organizing a charity event, my wife had seemingly vanished without a trace for about 2 months, leaving her friends feeling worried and perplexed. Shortly after ending the call with Samantha, my wife entered the room, elegantly dressed for a dinner with friends. Despite her impeccable appearance, I couldn't shake off the disquieting feeling that had settled over me since speaking with Samantha. I sensed that something was amiss. Despite my wife's reassurances, I couldn't let her leave without addressing my concerns. I gently took her hand, planted a kiss on it, and insisted on driving her to dinner. She appeared taken aback and attempted to dissuade me, claiming that it was unnecessary. However, I remained firm in my decision, feeling a growing sense of urgency and a need to ensure her safety. As we made our way to the car, my wife provided me with directions to the dinner, mentioning that it was being hosted by Virginia, the same friend who had caught my attention before. This detail only intensified my suspicions, and I resolved to uncover the truth behind my wife's mysterious disappearance. Upon arriving at the dinner venue, I observed my wife interacting with Virginia and the other guests. Despite the festive atmosphere, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that lingered within me. I made a mental note to keep a close eye on my wife's behavior throughout the evening, determined to discern any clues that might shed light on her recent absence. Throughout the dinner, my wife seemed somewhat distant, lost in her own thoughts. Despite my attempts to engage her in conversation, she appeared preoccupied, offering vague responses to my inquiries. As the evening progressed, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss, and my suspicions continued to grow. The revelation triggered a memory, recalling a recent Facebook post by Virginia, one of my wife's close friends, discussing an upcoming week-long trip. What caught my attention was my wife's comment, wishing Virginia a safe journey, just 3 days ago. As this realization dawned on me, my heart raced, palms grew sweaty, and my grip tightened on the steering wheel. I felt utterly clueless about how to navigate the impending situation. My wife's voice interrupted my thoughts, questioning my insistence on driving her, especially when I needed to rush back home to catch the kickoff. I could see through her ploy. She intended to create a scenario where I wouldn't have time to accompany her to the door and delve deeper into her deceit. I bantered with her, suggesting that I didn't have to catch because one of the players could catch it, and she appeared uneasy. She hesitated before admitting that she felt bad I couldn't join since it was a women-only dinner. My anger swelled as her words sounded far too suspicious. I pulled the car to a stop, and my wife's expression turned to horror as I shut off the engine and unbuckled my seatbelt. She leaned in for a kiss, casually mentioning me picking her up at 9. While I agreed, much to her surprise, I stepped out of the car and walked beside her. She halted, giving me a puzzled look. I shared that I wanted to be the gentleman and walk her to the door. She insisted I didn't need to, telling me to just go back home. Her rejection was deliberate, yet I just grinned. As we approached the front door, I knocked firmly, and her nerves became palpable. She froze in place, her mouth agape, while I glanced at her, struggling not to burst into laughter at her strange behavior. When the door swung open, revealing a man known as a fair partner, clad in a plush robe marked with his initials, my wife's expression shifted from pleased surprise to evident nervousness. At first, a fair partner appeared somewhat happy, but that quickly turned into nervousness. In a clear voice, I greeted him and stepped inside, explaining that I was escorting my wife to the women's only dinner hosted by Virginia. Curiously, I inquired about the absence of all the women, yet neither of them budged. Playfully ribbing my wife for her declaration of arriving late when, in reality, she was early, I drew their attention to the dinner table set for two, complete with filled wine glasses, putting on a perplexed expression. A fair partner's face started turning a shade of purple, yet he remained tight-lipped. In a feeble voice, my wife mentioned that the girls were running late. I immediately responded with a loud, "Is that so?" I inquired about Virginia's whereabouts. A silence hung for a moment before my wife suggested that Virginia might have dashed to the store for something. She attempted to involve the affair partner in her cover-up, but he was visibly annoyed. He straightforwardly said that playing games was futile, and I saw through their deception. He declared they were caught, and the charade was over. At this point, my wife's composure wavered, showing signs of distress. The affair partner didn't mince words. He ordered us out of his house, almost pushing us through the front door. Just before he closed it, I dropped a hint that it wouldn't bode well if someone were to tell his wife about the situation. He froze, locked eyes with me, and questioned my intentions. I made it clear that my intent was to expose their deceitful actions. I made it clear that I wanted him to provide me with any evidence of his affair with my wife, so the divorce proceedings would lean in my favor. Seeing his hesitation, I reminded him that 2 marriages didn't need to be ruined, but I warned him that I wouldn't hold back if he didn't assist me. He reluctantly agreed to provide evidence. When my wife heard his admission, she lost her composure, letting out a scream, snatching the keys from my hand, and driving off in a hurry. I managed to catch a ride back home and discovered that she had packed some of her belongings and taken her car. Soon enough, I received the proof from the affair partner, a collection of messages and images that left no room for doubt. My lingering questions were all answered. They had undoubtedly been intimately involved numerous times. I had initially intended to hold off on revealing everything to Virginia until after the divorce was finalized, but patience was a virtue I couldn't uphold. It didn't take much longer for Virginia to commence her retaliation against my wife. With knowledge of her mother's location and the ongoing divorce proceedings, it was a safe bet that my wife would be staying there. Rumors spread that Virginia was behind the act of slashing my wife's car tires and etching an unkind word onto the hood. The affair partner and my wife parted ways through divorce, and my ex-wife was ostracized from the circle of women in the community. Now she's left with no money, no friends, no husband, and absolutely nothing to show for her 46 years of life.